Today in this video, I'm going to be giving a general overview of how I make my Indy Bullwhips. There was a customer named Bradley from California who really wanted to see the process of how this works. I didn't do a super detailed bullwhip build, but there's plenty of videos on all of the little things about making bullwhips. But I just wanted to do a general overview of how I make mine. I care a lot that you guys see how this process happens. There's a lot of little things that I like to do when it comes to making bullwhips, and if you guys want to see how it's done, well then that's what I want to do for you. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be making this 8-foot long chocolate brown Indiana Jones bullwhip. All right, let's get to it. So here is the 1/4-inch steel rod, and I've cut it down to size for the Indy whip handle. As you can see, I grinded down the end with a grinder. You can just use a file if you don't have a grinder. And here's also all the measurements I'm going to be using. Some of the numbers will change and fluctuate just depending on you know, how much binding I have and if I need a little bit more paracord, especially for these smaller strands. I'll usually go like a little bit over on each one just to make sure I don't end up not having enough. So it's always better to caution on using more than less, especially with how cheap paracord is. So here is the finished core of the whip. So the metal rod ends about right here. And then from there on out, it's the sinker cord that's attached to it. And sinker cord is just basically paracord that has a wider diameter. And so that's so that way you can put some BBs inside of it. And that gives the whip quite a bit of heft, believe it or not. And then all of that is wrapped in some electrical tape. And that's to basically waterproof it, the BBs, and also to give the core of the whip a little bit of rigidity. That's the only time that I'm going to use electrical tape in the whip build. And then for the handle, I've got some hockey tape on it to give it some stickiness to put on the first layer. And then I've also binded at the transition some artificial sinew to give it some stiffness. And that is very, very important. Getting the core right is very important, like making sure the diameter's all the same across. And that there's already a taper, especially from the core to the sinker cord, because everything that is on the core is going to basically, once you put more and more layers on this whip, it's just going to make these little bits of imperfections just become more and more noticeable the more layers you put on. So it's really important to get it right now. Gonna go ahead and put on the first belly of this whip. So here's the progress of the first belly so far. I'm not going to go into detail at all on how I braid my whips because it's the exact same way that almost every single whip maker does on YouTube. It's actually how I learned how to do this, was on YouTube. And the channel that I personally recommend to learn how to do this is Nick's Whip Shop. He just does such amazing detailed videos. And I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description of one of his videos that teaches you how to braid. If you watch his videos, then you know exactly how I braid all of my whips. I really like to do a single braid on the handle portion. Even though there is the sticky hockey tape, I still prefer to tighten down my strands as much as possible on this first layer, because in the past, there was one time whenever I finished a whip, and thank goodness I wasn't selling it, but I finished a whip and the handle, whenever you grabbed the end of it, it would turn really easy because I didn't take the time to really tighten the first level of braiding. So I think that's extremely, extremely important to tighten down these first layer of strands, especially on the handle, as much as possible. And there is the finished first belly. Something that's really important that I really like to focus on when working on these bellies is a very smooth taper. You really want there to be almost like a unnoticeable transition point. You really want it to be a nice, smooth, gradual taper all the way down, because once again, you need to get it right on these core pieces, because if you don't, then your mistakes will just expound on each other and become bigger and bigger and more noticeable. Also, right here at the transition, Nick Schrader from Nick's Whip Shop had a really good idea of doing a diamond plait braid on the transition, because another thing you really want to focus on is getting that transition as stiff as possible, or else it's going to be an extremely weak whip. And speaking of that, I'm going to go ahead and bind this section right here. And I'm actually going to go ahead and bind it pretty far down the whip. That is going to make the whip nice and rigid, and that's also extremely important. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. If you're curious as to how I do this, once again, I just basically follow Nick's Whip Shop method of binding. Okay, so here is the finished binding of the whip. The first thing that I binded it with was artificial sinew. And then the next thing I binded it with was a much stronger nylon binding material, especially right here at the core. You really want that to be incredibly stiff, especially when you're dealing with an 8-foot Indy whip like this one's gonna be. And you can see just how stiff that already is. This is my least favorite part in whip making, easily, and I think most whip makers, nylon whip makers, will agree. It's incredibly time consuming and incredibly not fun. But it's definitely worth it, and especially on this first belly too, to get this right. Now I'm going to be starting this all over again, basically. Doing the second belly and then the binding on the second belly. I also want to mention that I also rolled this whip. I just used this piece of wood on the ground, and then I used a book to roll it out. As you can see, if it'll focus, there we go. It has made it nice and uniform all the way across. If you don't roll the whip, then it's going to be not as round. It's not going to lay down as smooth. It's going to be much more rough. And it helps all of the pieces of paracord to lay down flat and even. And it just gives the whip a nicer look. We're going to be doing that on every layer of the whip. And I also did that on the core as well. I just got this new setup not too long ago. Yes, I know. My cords are a mess right now. I'm still trying to figure that out. One of my favorite things about it is this standing desk. This is so convenient. Oh.
So now when my back starts to hurt, I can just stand up and work.
There we go. This is kind of a fun time to test out different color combinations for paracord. Honestly, I don't know what I'm going to go with right now. It's also a good time to use up colors you don't like. So here's the braiding so far, just to show you a little bit of how I do it. Pull tight around the back, pull the strand all the way through. Kind of see that mess down there on the floor. And hold the strands down with my finger, go around the back, grab it, pull it tight, bring it around the front, lay it down nice and even, pull the strand through, just like that. And then I just do that all the way down the whip. It kind of looks like a Christmas bullwhip. Look at that. You can see right here again, I did the diamond braiding, and you can just see how stiff that is already. And we're also going to put another layer of binding even over this. So this transition is going to be plenty stiff to take all of that weight of cracking this whip. It's coming along good. Here is the whip before the roll. don't know if you can see, but it's a little more rounded. You can feel the texture on there much more. Kind of see it right there. Okay, there's before. And here is after the roll. I don't know if you can tell much difference, but there's not as much texture. It's much more smooth. You can kind of see down the side right here. All those strands lay nice and flat. Rolling's extremely important, and when you do it right, the whip turns out real nice. So I'm gonna go ahead and put on my next layer of binding. Then I'm gonna finish with the overlay. I hate binding. And that was the easy part. It's getting there, nice and stiff. But right here at the transition, we really, really want to make sure that that's strong. So we're gonna move on from the nice, thick, artificial sinew, if it'll focus, the nice, thick, artificial sinew, to the ridiculously thin lacing material. Since this has a smaller surface area, it's going to cause more tension the more binding that is applied. So we're going to do the same thing we did here with the artificial sinew, touching it basically back to back, but we're going to be doing that with this stuff next. The good thing is that we only have to do it from about here to here, but that takes a lot longer than it looks. And it's just very time consuming. Time to put on an audiobook. Okay, after probably about 45 minutes later, it is done. I don't know if you can see. There we go. I didn't do it perfectly, but I did it pretty dang good. I really hope I'm not discouraging anybody from actually making a whip. There's a very specific reason why I have to put this much binding on a whip like this. This is a 8-foot whip, first of all. So it's going to have a lot of tension at that transition. But also a big thing is that in order to crack a whip, you need to have good leverage right here. And Indiana Jones bullwhips only have 8-inch handles, usually 8 to 9-inch handles usually. And I usually like 12-inch handles. So in order to have the ability to crack this whip really well, you really need a longer handle or a ton of binding right here, especially for an 8-foot whip. Yeah, Indiana Jones have a lot of things going against them. And finally, there's a third thing, is that they're not super thick. An Indiana Jones bullwhip is, to make it look like a good Indiana Jones bullwhip, you need to only do 3 layers. So 2 bellies and then the overlay to give it that streamlined look. I have a couple of examples right here. This is a bullwhip with a 12-inch handle. And it's only 6 feet, so I don't have to do an insane amount of binding right here in order to get the leverage you need. This is only 3 layers of paracord. This has 4 layers of paracord, and this is a 12-foot whip. So for a longer whip like this, you really want to thicken up that transition with another layer. However, for Indy whips, you have that skinnier version in order to look more like the movies do. So in order to compensate for that, you have to bind this area really, really well. However, if it was a smaller whip, a 6-foot whip, or a regular 8-foot whip where you just put on another layer, you wouldn't have to do this as much. But it just depends on the whip. And this is what you have to do for Indy whips, and honestly, it's worth it in the end. So please don't be discouraged about whip making. There are plenty of videos to follow that are way more simple than this method. I just want to make sure I give my customers a really good product that's not just accurate to the films, but also extremely usable and extremely strong. Oh man, the way I have this set up right now is absolutely hilarious. I'm sitting here in my chair with the camera tripod in front of me, and I'm like reaching around the tripod to work on this whip, and it's just so tangled down there. It's all good. We're gonna make it work. So this is something that I wanted to kind of highlight about the way I do my bullwhips. I do not like double strands. And when I say that, I mean, whenever you're dropping strands throughout the bullwhip, you can do this thing where you just keep on braiding on one side like this. And if you do that while dropping strands, eventually you're going to get to a point where there is a double strand. And quite honestly, it doesn't look good. It's a huge eyesore in a whip, in my opinion. I've never liked how they looked. So for a while now, I've been doing this method that I saw on Nick's Whip Shop's channel, and it was Eagle Whips showing him how to do this method to avoid double strands. And it basically, you get to a point where you are over, you have more strands above than you do under whenever you're braiding. If I dropped a strand right now, I would have a double strand. If I dropped it just like this. But what I'm going to do to avoid that is I'm going to take the whip out of the clamp. I'm going to turn the whip around like this. So I'm on the back side. Sorry, I'm hitting the tripod. I'm going to put the whip back in the clamp. Move it up a little bit. Like that. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is unravel the strands. Some of you guys have probably seen this method before, hopefully. I just want to highlight that I actually do this method. I think every whip maker should do this method, in my personal opinion. So there we go. We've undone it. And now look, we've reversed it. So now there's 3 on top and there's 4 on bottom. Okay? It's like magic. But now, when we go to drop the strand, now it will be what it is supposed to be. Okay, so we're going to bring that strand around the back. We're going to go under 3 over 4. Hold it. There we go. But yeah, I'm going to drop the strand pretty soon because the strands are starting to get a little bunched up. But that is what I do on all of my whips on the overlays. It just looks a whole lot better, and there will not be any double strands in the finished product. So one of the most difficult things when making whips that you need to do and focus on, there we go, is that whenever we're like getting to the thinner parts of the whip, especially, it's really important on every single belly, on the core, on the overlay, on everything that has to do with a whip, to focus on the gradual taper. It's going to be really, really tempting to want to do like really fast drop-offs. But the thing that we have to focus on more than anything, the thing that I focus on more than anything, is that gradual taper from beginning to end. And when you think about how a bullwhip works, it really needs to drop off pretty fast at the beginning. Whoops. You can tell this is a very professional video. it really needs to start off at the beginning, like dropping off pretty fast. But then as the whip goes on, that taper, it gets longer. In order for that crack to happen, in order for the physics to work, it has to, right off the bat, get that force and the thickness from right here and the strength. But then that whipping motion, it's got to carry through these smaller areas. And that's how it gets so fast. If this whip was just thick from top to, you know, the middle of it, then that's too much weight and not enough whipping motion. And we can demonstrate that later whenever we actually crack the whip. So for the rest of this whip, my focus is not going to be any major drop-offs, but a nice, long, gradual taper all the way to the bottom. So I just got to this point in the whip. I've braided to this point. I'm down to 2 strands, but I want to keep 2 strands for right now because we talked about that gradual taper. Eventually, the 2 core strands are going to eventually turn to 1 strand, but we're not going to do that until a little bit later. What we're going to do is we're going to find our smallest strand, and right now it is, I think I know what it is. It is that one. That's our smallest strand, okay, right there. So what we need to do is to get that strand to where it's ready to drop. So that, there we go. It's ready to drop. So now what we're gonna do is we're going to take that strand, we're gonna drop it like I've been doing. Tighten all the strands, tighten, 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 tighten. And then we're going to do our best to not make it to where this slants down, but we're gonna just bring it over, scooch it over, and there we go. Now it's a core strand. It was really important to do that right here where this one ends. We want to start this one right where this one ends, or else a crease could form, first of all, because just an immediate drop off like that could cause a crease. Not always, but I just like to do it just in case. But also we want to continue, the most important part is that we continue the 2 strands. We don't want there to be a point where there's 3 strands and then randomly down to 2. We want to continue this and make it as smooth as possible. So we're going to continue braiding under 2 over 2 on the left side, and then under 2 over 1 on this side. We're going to braid down until we need to drop another strand. Okay, so I'm at the point now where I finished braiding the whip and I've already rolled it. It's looking pretty good, pretty happy with it. I'm going to give it another rolling before I put it in the wax. But right now, I'm actually working on the heel knot. So I braided a wrist loop, cut the end off, melted that, and I'm probably going to put a leather patch on the bottom to hide those colors. Just a tiny thin piece of leather with some super glue, not super glue, hot glue. Cover that up. And I'm just going to keep wrapping this heel knot with lead to give that heft, because that's what helped balances out the whip. And I just put it in with staples as well. Staples have always held it, so pretty okay with that. I'm just going to keep wrapping it in lead until I thicken up the heel knot. It's going to be well balanced. It's going to want to crack easily because of that. And actually, classic Indy whips, the heel knots all have lead in them, so it even feels like a, especially after that waxing, it feels like a leather whip. So I'm gonna finish that up, and then see where we're at after that. Well, there we go. It's kind of hard to tell, but there is 4 layers of lead right here. I just wrapped it all in hockey tape for the overlay, so that way the strands stick easier. But I went ahead and I went ahead and hot glued on that top patch, so that way whenever you see the tiny little bit of strands that you'll see in there, you'll just see leather, but it'll close up around it like that. But yeah, since we had that green layer underneath, I don't want anyone to see that. But yeah, so the main point of doing this is, first of all, to give the heel of the bullwhip some heft to even out the balance. But also, I like using lead because it's so easy to shape into the pineapple knot that an Indiana Jones bullwhip always is. So if you see here, it fits right in your hand perfectly. It sits there exactly where it's supposed to be, because that's how you're actually supposed to hold a bullwhip, is like that. And it fits in there perfectly. And then once we get that, it just needs a tiny bit thicker, but that will come from the paracord. So once that paracord's wrapped around there, it's going to be perfect. So let's go ahead and do that. And then we'll move on to the transition knot. If you guys are curious what the workstation looks like right now, a lot of bent staples, a lot of shards of lead. Hopefully I don't get lead poisoning. That much lead won't give you lead poisoning. I just have to make sure I wash my hands and not touch my face. Oh boy, got a lot of cleaning up to do after this. That feels a little bit better. Okay, well, I just finished working on the knots, and it is now currently soaking in the paraffin wax. Oh, I really hope I don't drop my phone. That would be tragic. But there it is, soaking in the wax. We're just gonna let that soak for about probably just 5 minutes until it stops bubbling. Then we're gonna take it out and dry it off, and the whip will be done, except for the cracker. That's the thing that makes it go whoop-ah! This thing. And there is the finished whip out of the wax, cooled down. And there you kind of see that that wax on the surface level. When you scratch it off, it kind of wears off a little bit just on the surface. It gives it a weathered look, almost like wax. The more you use it, or like wax, like leather, and the more you use it, it actually looks more and more like leather, which is really awesome. But yep, there is the finished whip. There's the cracker attached, and there's the fall attached and ready to go. And I'm gonna take it out in the morning and give it a test crack. I'll see you in a minute. I'm sorry I kept chuckling in that video. My friends are in my ears and knowing that I'm trying to video and and they're trying to say stuff to distract me, so please forgive me. Well guys, we just finished the 8-foot long Indy Bullwhip, and now we're gonna go ahead and give it a test crack, and this will be the first crack ever of this bullwhip. I'm really excited for this one. We have to do the underhand crack. Huh. I chopped off a little bit of the tree. Man, I don't know if you can tell in the video, but there's a reason why I wanted it to be nice and stiff right here at the transition. That's what gives it that springiness. That's what makes it so effortless to crack. Wow. Whew. Sometimes after I make a whip and I get done cracking it, I start shaking. I know that might be dumb, but that is just so cool. When you put in so much work and effort into something, and you just get to see the obvious fruit of it, yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. Whew, that's awesome. Bradley, man, I really, really hope you love this whip and that it gives you so much joy, so much more joy than it even gave me in making it and even cracking it just now. So, Bradley, my friend, thank you so much for your business. I really hope you enjoy this, man. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this general overview of this bullwhip. It was awesome to spend some time with you guys. I really hope you guys have a truly blessed day. God bless you guys.